all kind of have a reason for being here, and we don't necessarily know what that is. And so for me, I'm like, okay, I want to make sure that I am doing my best to fulfill that meaning and do my best job that I can while I'm here. And so, every morning I'm like, okay, how can I get closer to fulfilling what I think my purpose is?
Welcome to the Happiness and Progress podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Craig. I'm an Emmy Award-winning journalist, international speaker, mom, wife, and you know what I like to say, just a person looking for more joy in the everyday. This is a space where you belong, not because you earned it, not because of your title, your paycheck, or number of kids you have, but just because you are human and you are good. Here we explore progress over perfection, emotional and spiritual wellness, and how to relish the good parts of life that coexist with the not so good parts. This is Happiness in Progress. Today is your day because today's episode is so cool. I think you are going to love it. I get to share this conversation I had with Nurse Hadley. Hadley is a registered nurse specialized in hospice and palliative care. She's a nonprofit founder and the author of the new book, The In-Between. This book is amazing, as you're going to find out. But first, I want to give a shout out to one of my Patreon subscribers, Kristen McKendry. Shout out to you. Thank you so much for subscribing. All right, back to the book. In The In-Between, Hadley shares the personal experiences she's had as a hospice nurse that have cemented her belief in an afterlife. In this conversation, we are going to talk about what she has witnessed in hospice as patients' loved ones seemingly come from beyond to escort them from this life to the next. She also talks about how she believes some of her patients have actually protected her from the other side, and hear about the advice she thinks about often and how all of this changes the way she lives her life. Let's get to it. Hadley, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I found your account and just instantly I knew that I had to follow you, and I saw that you had this amazing book come out. So I'm just so excited that you can be here today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited for it.
So I think I was kind of telling my husband a little bit about what the interview was about. And he's like, oh my goodness, that sounds devastating that you would want to talk to a hospice nurse. And I'm sure you get this a lot, that
Yes.
This is a devastating job. But once you kind of like delve into your work, you see that there's a lot of hope around what you do. So tell me a little bit about the hope that is being a hospice nurse.
Yeah, absolutely. I get that all the time. Just, everyone just thinks it's so depressing. So, there's this misconception around hospice that it's so depressing. But in reality, I'm with people who are choosing death on their own terms. They are deciding, I want to be at home. I want to be with my family, or, wherever they want to be will come to them. And, I want to be comfortable. This is what's important to me. And there's a lot of beauty in that.
You tell all of these incredible stories that kind of give people and yourself this knowledge of some kind of afterlife.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about, maybe if you can like rewind all the way to the first time one of these things happened and you like, it was like a big, oh my goodness, what just happened kind of moment.
I've been a hospice nurse for 6 years now. So whenever I decided to write this book, basically it's 12 chapters and 12 patients. So there's definitely patients that I was like, oh, they absolutely need to be in the book. They changed my life in a huge way. But then there's other ones. So I'm talking with my literary agent and I'm like, how do I decide? I've taken care of thousands of people at this point. How do I decide who to put? So we're talking through it and he was like, you know what? I think you need to start from the first patient. So chapter 1 was my first patient that I ever had, die while I was there. And so I actually got called in with my manager. I'm still like under another nurse learning. And she's like, okay, we have something. I need you to meet me at this house. So I come and she is talking to her deceased sister. And I was like, oh, okay. Like I've seen hallucinations before. Like, okay, let's see what medications we're going to use. And that's where I thought that was going when my manager said, you need to come. And she was like, no, like she's happy. She's safe. All you need to make sure is that she's calm, peaceful. Everything's okay. And so I actually stayed with her so her daughter could get some sleep while she talked to her deceased sister.
Wow.
And that was quite interesting to witness. And the interesting thing about it is that she was also talking to me. So it's almost like there's another person in the room that I can't see. And so at one point she was like, "You think I'm crazy, huh?" And I was like, "No, of course not. I don't think you're crazy." And she was like, "Yeah, my daughter thinks I'm crazy." And, there's this awareness around it. So it's not like someone, per se going crazy. And so that was like my first intro to people seeing their deceased loved ones. And I was like, wow. And I mean, I've seen it so many times since then, but everyone seems to see their deceased loved ones and there's a calmness about it, like a peace about it. Not like hallucinations can be scary, like spiders on the walls,
Yeah,
There's always
right.
a calmness about it.
Right. What was that conversation about?
So she was like joking with her sister and talking to her and just being like, she's like, "Oh no, you're too much," and like laughing with her. And it was so interesting. So she ended up taking a nap. And, when she woke up, she said that like she had also seen her parents and like everyone just looked so wonderful. And I was like, that just sounds so wonderful.
Yeah.
And the very interesting thing about it was that her daughter was really disturbed by all of this and just thought like, you know what, she needs medication. Y'all need to handle this. Or like, I'm calling 911 is basically how the conversation went. And so her daughter woke up and came over and she had just told me, 2 seconds ago that she was still talking to deceased loved ones and seeing them. And her daughter comes in and she's like, "Are you still seeing people?" And she was like, "No, I guess I was just tired." And so I like called my manager and I was like, "What in the world is going on?" She was like, to me, that shows that she has like a real understanding of what's going on, that she's taken into account her daughter's feelings as well.
Yeah.
And like saying like, "I don't want my daughter to be disturbed by this. So I'm just going to say like, nope, I'm not seeing anyone."
Wow.
It was
Isn't that
very
incredible?
interesting, like, really my first intro to being like, "Okay, I think this is something more."
I love that she was aware of that relationship with her daughter that she wanted to protect, but also that she still had these relationships with people that she lived with here on Earth. That's incredible.
It is, it really is. It's still to this day, it's so incredible to be able to be there. I just feel so lucky to be able to be in those rooms and witness that.
My great grandmother was at the end of her life and she really wasn't communicating a lot with us. And one night, one of my relatives had a really rough night and they were like, "Oh my goodness, she's not okay. We got to call." And they called, and what they found was that she was like overjoyed and was talking sense and was talking about that she had seen her mother dancing and her mom hadn't been able, my great great grandma and her mom hadn't been able to dance. And I just like, we were all like, oh my goodness. So I can't imagine experiencing that regularly, seeing this kind of like uh, this proof of an afterlife.
Yeah, and that's how I consider it. And the interesting thing is that through sharing these stories on social media and in my book, I think so many people like you have these stories where they're like, "You know what? That was really cool," but they don't think too much into it because that's all they know. They
Mhm.
only know. And then whenever they hear stories from myself, like hospice and other hospice nurses, they're like, "Oh, wait, like other people, I thought this was just my experience. Like I didn't know other people had this experience too. Like maybe there's something more to it," which I
Yeah.
think is so interesting.
And I think it's super interesting if you only have the one-off experience to be like, "Oh, must have been a
Yeah,
hallucination. Her
exactly.
memories are coming back up," or whatever. That is so interesting. So how has this impacted the way you live your life? Like what you put value on in your life?
It's to such an extreme. I really, really, it's such a cliche statement, but like I really do live life to the fullest. And I get a reminder so often at how short it can be. And, they're always telling me, it goes by so fast. I hear that so much. It really just goes by so fast. And, every time I feel like caught up in things, especially like material things, I get a reminder that like we can't take it with us when we go. Like it really doesn't matter at the end of the day. And what really, really matters at the end is like who's surrounding you, both, on the other side and here, and like the relationships that you have with people. Like that's really, really what matters at the end.
What have you learned from the people that are the physical people who are still alive, who are surrounding their loved ones in these final days?
Being a caregiver is incredible. And I think that, we really don't discuss it. The hot topic lately has seemed to have been like moms and postpartum and how difficult they have it. And I think we need to include caregivers in those conversations because I don't think people really understand the difficulties that come with being a caregiver. It is incredibly, incredibly such a thankless job and just very difficult to be a caregiver. And I really would like to see them, start to be included in those conversations, because they are some of the most selfless people I've ever met.
I think a lot of people think about this a lot because we try to live our lives the best that we can, and so that there's like no regrets. And I think we'll probably have regrets no matter what. What are some of the things that people bring up in the final days of their lives?
Yeah, I definitely hear where people feel like they cared a lot what other people thought instead of just what they wanted, really caring about society. Or, I had one patient say, like, Betty down the street. She really was always concerned about what Betty down the street thought. And, that can translate into a lot of things, feeling like you should take a certain job, or you should, have a certain house or a certain car. And it can really influence, how you live your life instead of really just doing what you want to do. And I hear that a lot. And I really, think that that's very interesting. But on the other end of the spectrum, I've also had patients who make very hasty decisions that they also regret. And, they say, I wish I wouldn't have done that. So I think it's important to kind of take from each and say, okay, like, if something's not serving me, I need to change. But maybe give it a week or so and make sure that that's really what it is, and don't like impulsively, change your life just because something isn't feeling good today. Mm-hmm. So, I think that there's definitely the give and the take. And sometimes I think that at the end of life, there is a bit of was the grass greener kind of thing.
I think that's probably just our human mind, because we kind of struggle with that our whole lives.
Yeah.
I love the Betty down the street story, because she also went on to say, I cared about what Betty down the street said, but now she's dead.
Yeah, she was a firecracker.
Like, we're just all humans, and to put all of our decision making in someone else's hands, like it's funny that we do it so often, but it really doesn't make that sense when you have that life's perspective looking back.
Yeah, it really caught me off guard when she said it. And I was like, okay, I mean, you're right.
Oh, my.
You're not wrong.
Is there a piece of advice or something like, just sharing these end of life moments that maybe you've revisited when you've been like making a hard decision, or just going through your life? Has there been a piece of advice that has stuck out to you?
Yeah, a really big one. I call her Elizabeth in my book. She was younger for a hospice patient, and she was dying from she had lung cancer of an unknown cause. I mean, she was the picture of health, a yoga instructor, did everything right, never smoked a cigarette. And she never got married. And she was alone at the end of her life, other than a sister who really didn't care down the street. And I was there one of my last visits, and she just said, you know what, like, I've been thinking a lot, like, I don't have anything else to do but sit here and think. And I see myself in you, and I like really need to tell you that I feel like I spent a lot of time on the treadmill, or like not hanging out with my friends, or like doing things because I really cared about my weight and what other people thought about me. She said, I really wish I would have just eaten the cake. And I said, wow, like, yeah, eat the cake. Like, that's a really, really good advice. And it was very eye-opening for me, because she, in my opinion, she was, like I said, the picture of health, like everything you could want, but she was alone at the end because she had been so just obsessed with how she looked, instead of like really building those relationships and skipping events. And I think about eat the cake probably every day. Yeah. I mean, I think it's so important.
So many of these stories just bring me back to we're just humans, and we're just learning all of these things. What have you learned about humanity? Like, what this experience of being a human is like?
I think the biggest thing I've learned is that we have no idea what other people are going through. And I have totally changed the way that I interact with everyone, because it's very interesting to go into these homes. I go into the homes of actual like movie stars, and then homeless patients, and sometimes in the same day. And these people that you would think just have everything, just their whole life together. You just see so much behind the scenes that, that saying where they're like, if everyone threw their problems into a pile and you could see everyone's, you would grab yours back very quickly. I mean, I think that is extremely true. And we just really have no idea what the people around us are like really going through. And it's had me give like so much more grace to people. Like, even if it's like a mean commenter online, or just someone cuts you off in the road, you know what I mean? I always think like, I hope they're doing okay. Like, maybe they're super distracted because something really, is going on in their life, or like they're really hurting and they need to like get something off their chest and hurt someone else. It's like just that we have no idea what other people are going through.
That's what I was going to ask you, is how you deal with those things that are really annoying that other people do. And it sounds like you just take the moment to say, I don't know what they're going through. Is that it? Is that all there is to it?
Kind of, yeah. And I mean, it's really, you think that it's like almost like giving grace to other people, but it's helped my mental health a lot to not constantly think that like people are just trying to hurt you, or like, that other like people have something against you. Cause really what I've learned, behind the scenes is that just a lot of people have a lot of other stuff going on. And I don't think it's right to take it out on others, but I think that when there's understanding that it's really not personal, it helps. And I think I've been a happier person because of it. Giving people the benefit of the doubt really helps your mental health as well.
Right. What is something you know today that you didn't know 6 years ago when you started?
Oh, so much, so much. I would definitely say, I believe in an afterlife now, and I did not 6 years ago. I grew up extremely religious and was just told, you just believe, that's it. And then I had some events that happened in my life that made me be like, these people aren't supporting me, and, they're not really going by the teachings and like what is really going on. It really made me think. And I was like, I just don't know if that is really what's going on. And so now, after being with so many people before they die, like I do know that there is something beyond this life, and I'm not scared to die, which is really a big deal for me. I don't fear death. And the biggest thing for me is that whether I die in 70 years or tomorrow, I make sure that every single day I'm like, okay, if I die today, like I will feel comfortable speaking to any higher being about how I live my life. And I can say confidently that I did my best and I think I did a good job. And that's what's really important to me.
Yeah, I think that makes for an experience of life that is one you can be proud of.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I know it's a practice, and sometimes we have harder days, and
oh yeah,
but
100%.
but I think that's really, really beautiful. What are some of the things that give you this not fear of dying? Because I think a lot of people have that fear.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that help you to not be afraid of dying that you could share with the listeners?
Just the amount of people that I've seen who have their deceased loved ones come to get them, that I feel like that's going to happen for me as well. And it's always extremely peaceful. They always feel, no matter, even people who were anxious before and had a lot of anxiety, whenever their loved ones come to get them, they're always at peace. And, it really can be quite beautiful, and really believing that there is something beyond this life just makes me feel like it's not the end, which I think is where a lot of the fear of death comes from. Just being afraid that this is it.
Yeah, for sure. What kind of meaning does it give to your life that you believe that life goes on after this human experience?
Yeah, I feel like we all kind of have a reason for being here, and we don't necessarily know what that is. And so for me, I'm like, okay, I want to make sure that I am doing my best to fulfill that meaning and do my best job that I can while I'm here. And so, every morning I'm like, okay, how can I get closer to fulfilling what I think my purpose is? And, it's a great way to wake up.
Mm-hmm. What do you hope that people get from your book as they read it? What do you hope the impact is?
I hope that people are less fearful of death. And, they say studies show that talking about death, just, not avoiding it, can help with the fear of it. I hope anyone who's lost a loved one can feel some peace, especially people like you who have experienced some of the things before, that they can feel like, oh, wow, that wasn't just like a one-off kind of weird thing. And they can kind of put some purpose to it, which I think is important. And, just feel like, okay, I need to wake up today and like do the best I can, and, be the best human I can.
This experience that you had where you were going to buy this frozen pizza. Can you tell me about this in case anybody hasn't gone over to your Instagram and see the story? The story is so wild to me.
Yeah. And, I really never pieced it together until like many months later after the fact.
Yeah.
But basically we had gone out of town for the weekend, came back on a Sunday night and we were like, oh gosh, the house smells horrible. And we forgot to take out the trash. So we were like, oh, great. Let's run to the grocery store real quick, get the essentials for the week. We have 3 kids. And so we ran to the grocery store. I walked past the frozen section and in the corner of my eye, saw this pizza that my patient used to always eat. And I knew it well because she used to always make me make it for her.
Yeah.
And just all she ate. And so I like walked past it and I was like, oh yeah, like that's that, memory, and keep going. And in my head, I just keep hearing, go get this frozen pizza. And I'm like, we don't eat frozen pizza. And like, we have this little local pizza place down the road that's the same cost. So I was like, oh my God, this is so weird. So I'm like, can't even think straight. Something keeps telling me to get this frozen pizza. So I'm finally like, okay, I'm just gonna get the frozen pizza, like whatever. So I like throw it in the cart. We go home. We are on the couch and we're going to get a pizza from the local place. And we call it, I call it, my husband calls it, they won't answer the phone. And it's not even like that late. Like they're not closed. I'm like, what is going on? Why won't they answer the phone? So finally I'm like, I got a frozen pizza. Like I have the solution. And he was like, okay, whatever. So I go to preheat the oven. I hear it beep that it's ready, go back in the kitchen and the entire oven was on fire. And I was like, oh my goodness. So of course, my husband's like, get the kids out. Like, he used fire extinguisher, all that. And they had to do a fire investigation for insurance. And they determined that there was a gas leak, which is what that smell was when we got home that we thought was the trash. And the fire investigator told us, well, he was kind of reprimanding us because we didn't have the gas detector, thing. And he was like, I just want you to know that like all of y'all would have died if y'all would have gone to sleep that night and not turned on that oven. And I was like, oh my goodness. And then a few months later, I was thinking about it and I was like, wow, like everything that had to line up for me to even turn on that oven, like is crazy.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I get goosebumps.
I get weird,
goosebumps because that's so wild. Like, and I think I read somewhere that you wrote about like one coincidence. Okay. Yes. 2 coincidences. Can you share any other of these coincidences?
Yeah. There's
these non-coincidences.
Yeah, there's so many. And, one I have in my book was a patient that I had taken care of. And I went and saw him in the middle of the night because he was seeing his deceased mom. And so we were very close. And I told him, I think that you're actually seeing her. He thought that he was going crazy, basically. And so I left there and I felt like, when you're like walking with a friend, like you're not by yourself. And so I left there and I felt like I was not alone and get back home, go to sleep. I'm like, the next morning I'm getting ready and I felt like someone was there with me. And I was like, this is just the weirdest thing. So I go to my husband and I'm like, hey, do you ever feel this way? And he's like, yeah, I mean, sometimes, I go back in, and I'm like changing out of my scrubs from the middle of the night, into a new pair of scrubs to go back into work. And I realized that I had left my name tag on the ones that were in the laundry. So I go to get my name tag off and all of a sudden I feel this like wind behind me. And so I called my husband. I'm like, hey, does the air like ever just blow really hard, like the AC? And he's like, yeah, when it kicks on, it does. And I was like, oh, okay. Forgot to get the name tag off my scrubs, go back, get ready, bring the kids to school, all that stuff. I'm driving to work and I'm like, oh my God, I forgot to get that name tag off my scrubs. Turn around because my manager was crazy about that.
Yeah.
And then I'm like running late now. And so I'm like going and the cars come to a stop and I'm like, oh gosh, like now I'm really running late, and I realized that it was a car accident just like a mile up the road. And it was 2 trucks that hit each other, but I had like a car and it was bad, but thankfully everyone was okay because it was 2 trucks. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that could have been me. How we all think like, oh my, thank goodness for that delay. So I go to morning meeting, get called out of morning meeting because that patient died. And I go and I take care of him and all that. And his caregiver, as I'm leaving, is like, oh, by the way, the patient kept saying the other day that he was so afraid about you getting into a car accident. Like, please be careful. And I was like, oh my goodness.
Wild. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So that was another one that was just like crazy.
It's so wild. And one of the things that stuck out to me in the story is you kept calling your husband to ask about these things. Like,
Yeah.
what is that? Do you think that's like us trying to disprove that anybody might be able
Yes.
to be sending us some kind of message?
Yeah, absolutely, and I still do it because 'cause I'm always like, "This is weird." And he was like, "Yeah, like it yeah, it happens."
I think it's really neat because I think that when you're with these people, you are forming these really special relationships with them, and some that seemingly like transcend death, and then on the other side, they are still watching out for you. I think that's pretty powerful and pretty neat impact to have on these people's lives.
Yeah, I think so too. I absolutely do. And, like I've said, like, one thing, like, one coincidence is like, the fire. It's like, okay, that's an interesting thing. But I mean, I've had it happen so many times now that it's like, can these all be coincidences? That's strange.
Mhm. What did the relationships themselves mean to you? You're in these homes, during what can be scary times for some, it sounds like, and not as scary for others, but what do forming these relationships with all of these people mean to you?
It's a lot. And I think that people don't really realize how much we can form relationships. You're going into people's homes, which is just different than like the hospital because you're like in their space with their memories, and photos, their dogs, their loved ones, their grandkids, and you get to know everyone. So it's hard to not form those relationships. And, many patients, whenever they're not having like end of life emergencies, you have like a little schedule. So like I have patients that I see every Tuesday, Thursday. Have patients I see every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And, there's always those patients that you see first thing in the morning. So, I've had patients that I've taken care of for 9 months. So every Tuesday, Thursday morning, I have my coffee at their house for 9 months. And that, it really doesn't hit you at their death usually because there's a lot of tasks to do whenever you're there. Um, but that next Tuesday morning, whenever there's a new patient on you, is like, oh gosh, like that's really when it hits you because
Mhm.
they become part of your life too.
Mhm. There's so much beauty and hope in what you do, but is there also, like, is there a grieving or a mourning that you go through as you lose each of these people that you've had coffee with or made frozen pizza for?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't begin to I mean, I cried recording the audiobook, I cried writing the book. I mean, you really do grieve for people again and, especially some patients that you get very close to. But also, I mean, I feel like I'm going to see them again and that helps. But I'm grieving more for the fact that it's hopefully going to be a while.
I think it's incredible what you do. I'm so
Thank you.
thankful that you're sharing this, and I'm so thankful to share this episode. The last question I always ask people is, what is your number one tip to finding more joy in the good, the bad, and the in between of life?
My number one tip is actually therapy. I went to therapy and it helped me. It really did help me a lot. They're skilled professionals and I didn't even realize what was not normal until I went to therapy and they really helped me re-understand, what is normal, what is not, and when you need some help.
Thank you so much, Hadley. I can't believe
Thank
30 minutes
you.
went by so fast.
Yeah.
I loved talking to Hadley. You will find a link to get her book in the show notes. She also has an Instagram that is just a joy to follow. Find that link in the show notes as well. If you're new here, don't forget to rate the podcast. It really helps me to continue doing this work. And you want to remember to smash the subscribe button. I have learned that from my kids' favorite YouTubers, and I know you have to smash it. I'm just kidding. You can press it delicately. All will be well. And I will see you back here on Happiness in Progress.